said, yeah, that may be true. Your senses might deceive you, but your senses aren't going to deceive you if you're a normal regulating person about how far a car is from you, or where the light's coming from, or that there is a sound in the vicinity, and you can get a general idea where the sound's coming from. So your senses help you navigate through the environment. They help you get things done. And I conceded to that point because that's very true. But I had needed to point something out to him that he was grossly misunderstanding. Our senses, because we're evolved things, are made to get us through the environment. And they're there to help us do things in the environment, to render it and maneuver through it. But rendering the environment and moving through it is not necessarily the same thing as coming to the true conclusion of what constitutes reality. If you're asking what's ultimately true for all times, given all situations, your senses don't help. They limit you in a severe way. And so it's just that I don't necessarily trust the senses. I don't necessarily trust anything in of itself, by itself, to give me the correct conclusion about a thing. I use a combination of things, but it's just to say this, that for the INTP and the ENTP, there is a very, very strong foundation of doubt, no matter how much we care about objective reality and our ability to actually be able to come to it. We will make the Tower of Babel, but do we actually think we're going to reach heaven? Maybe, maybe not, but we are not so foolish to believe that it's just the actually earthly material we're using will actually ascertain and get us to the heights that we so strongly covet and desire. That's not something that's existent in the NT psyche. And so it's for many of these reasons why you'll hear skepticism from INTP or an ENTP, and it's not merely because we're trying to be difficult. It's just that we actually care about knowledge. And I think that's the final point I want to make, is for NTs, we're knowledge-seeking types in general, but when you're talking to an ENTJ or an INTJ, they will be very knowledgeable, particularly if they're educated. And I mean, they have a degree of some sort and they're an expert in a field of some sort. But they care about results, ultimately, using the knowledge that they have to achieve the desires that they want in the external environment. Not necessarily the truth, or what we consider truth as ENTPs and INTPs. We care about knowledge. It sounds sort of simplified in of itself, not for any means or sort of achieving anything in the external environment, but really having a solid foundation and understanding of the environment itself. And you get skepticism out of us because of that. And skepticism is not something we use or are trying to use to be jerks or difficult or just gadflies, as Socrates was called, an annoyance. It's just that we're epistemologists, and I've said this before in previous videos. We're fundamentally concerned with knowledge. You can give an ENTP or an INTP whatever moniker you want, but at bottom we're epistemologists. We're concerned with knowledge and knowledge structures. We want to know how they emerge, because we don't necessarily trust them. Just because there's a body of knowledge there doesn't mean it's trustworthy. And why does it matter if we trust knowledge, or if we get what's true or what's false? This is something that a lot of people will ask me. Well, what does it matter if you know if something's true or false? If you're concerned with results in the environment, then it really matters. It really matters. If you're concerned with social relations, insofar as how things play out in a given political context, you know, you can come up with these political theories and these political ideas, but do they address enough of the true for them to be extant in the world without causing a great deal of problems and issues? It's just, if you're a pragmatist, you should care about the truth, but I suppose just for an NTP, there is no real rational reason. I don't think that. There's no real rational reason for me to care about the truth, but if I have this sort of framework that I have for typology as a phenomenological ecology, meaning that the structure of experience and how we harmonize and get along with one another and sort of preserve our species and proliferate our species is very dependent on all the types being actualized and expressing themselves in unison with one another at their strongest standpoints and vantage points of reality. That may have been a mouthful, but it's just that we need to work in cohesion and harmony as actualized individuals in an ecosystem, like any sort of other ecosystem you would find in nature, that societies should try to structure themselves this way and use typology as a tool. That's sort of that's a belief I have, or a foundation I have in my vantage point of looking at typology. And if you look at it through that lens, it's just that ENTPs and INTPs were the shepherds of knowledge. We're the shepherds of that category for human expression and existence. We are the ones that interface with it, deal with it, decide, make decisions about it. Knowledge, that's our space. And so we're just, it's maybe NFs can understand it, and so far as if they're an introverted feeling type, it's the values of the individual and values. It's just we care about it so much, like the introverted feeler and their values and their moral systems, that the impetus for being able to come to an impetus that's rationally derived and so far is not possible, because we, out of our bare existence and out of the bare necessity of our existence, we're the shepherds of knowledge. We're the epistemologists. We're the ones that care about knowledge to the truest extent. We're purist in that way, and so far as we don't necessarily want to do anything with it other than understand it. And so that's the conclusion. That's excuse me, that's not the conclusion, but that's the skepticism you see in the NTP, and hopefully this video has helped you understand skepticism insofar as how it emerges from the NTP given our cognitive functions, whether the ENTP or the INTP, and why you may be frustrated in arguments with us, but that frustration is good, and hopefully this will help you understand where it's coming from and why it doesn't seem like the INTP you're arguing with doesn't seem to want to budge, or the ENTP is just not interested in what you're not. I wouldn't say not interested, but just not at all convinced by what you just presented to them, though you think you've presented them with just the most logical argument you could have. So that's the skepticism of ENTPs and INTPs. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.